Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference, empowering the good in our community. And we're kicking it off with Lipscomb University, talking about conflict management, philanthropy, giving back, so much around leadership. We're joined by Dr. Steve Joyner. He is the Dean of the College of Leadership and Public Service and the Executive Director for the Institute for Conflict Management with Lipscomb University. How are you doing, Dr. Joyner?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Doing well. So we have a lot of ground to cover. Before we dive into the work you do with Lipscomb University, give us a little bit of your background personally, because you have a unique background, especially when it comes to conflict management, public service, and all of these areas of expertise. But give us some of your personal background.
It's really interesting. So I came through kind of through the back door, ending up in higher ed and conflict management and leadership and public service. I began career as a youth pastor in South Texas, working on the border of Mexico in a 97% Hispanic community. And we loved it as a McAllen, Texas. We loved it down there, spent many years. Then I moved to another larger church. And while I was there, I finished my doctorate in leadership, but really had planned to stay in some type of community service and ministry. And then people would ask me, why did you go get your postdoc in conflict management? I said, you're kidding. I worked in churches. You know, the worst behaved people I know went to church with me, it seems like. And so I kind of went into that and began to do some teaching and training. And one day I was training at a church on how to work with people. And the CEO of United Supermarkets in Texas, that's kind of the Publix of Texas, walked up and said, hey, my mid-managers need this kind of training. I said, I don't know anything about companies. He says, same thing, man, just come on. And so suddenly it expanded. And then I went into university work, became a college professor, and over the years have ended up just kind of grown and grown. And then now I'm the Dean of the College of Leadership and Public Service, which is really geared toward, you know, how do we make Tennessee the best place we can to live? And so that's kind of the trip I've made. I admit I'm a recovering Texan, but I've been here 14 years, which by Nashville standards is forever. So I feel good.
So dive into the structure, because you've got the conflict management, the public service. Talk about the structure.
Okay, so we have this college. It was really interesting. So the president of the university, Dr. Lowry, called me in 3 or 4 years ago and said, hey, I'm starting this new college. And I'd been a dean before and had some other roles of vice president of the university. And I'm like, great, you go right ahead. Hope it goes well for you. He said, oh, no, you're the new dean. He tells it differently, but that's how I see this thing. And what we decided is to form a college that not only educated students, but was outward facing. So how do we help our community? How do we make Nashville, Tennessee, the Southeast a better place to live? And so we pulled in all these kind of disparate degrees that are really geared toward making our world a better place. So at the undergrad level, we have urban studies, and Dr. Michelle Steele does a fantastic job of helping our students. I mean, we have a lab right here in Nashville. All the problems of small towns and big cities are in Nashville. Then we have a environmental science and sustainability at the undergrad level. And then we also have something called law, justice, and society, which is our biggest undergrad degree. And these are people who, they want to go to law school, or they want to work in nonprofits, or they want to deal with the broad range of justice issues that are out there. It's actually named the Fred D. Gray Institute for Law, Justice, and Society. Mr. Gray was Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks' lawyer. He's still alive, 92. And he was kind enough to lend his name to this. And so that's the undergrad, very much. And then the grad, same thing. So we have conflict management, which is my area. And it's really geared toward this broad field of how do you manage difficulty, ranging from mediators and court-appointed mediators to nonprofits, to facilitators, to people who go into organizations and help them solve their issues. And we have a master's degree on, I tell people it's a degree on how to help people get unstuck, how to take really difficult moments and move through it. We have a master's in sustainable practice, which is really growing here in Nashville and across the nation. If people are interested, and there's all kind of tracks they can do, like stormwater management, urban housing, food issues, right? And then finally, there's a master's degree in leadership and public service and public administration. And it's really geared toward moving people into government, state and local kind of roles, nonprofits and governments. And the phrase for that degree is where Tennessee turns for leadership. So we really want to produce leaders that really help our state be a better place. And we can talk more about this, but interestingly enough, that has become a degree for a lot of rural leaders to come in and get training. And finally, we have something called the Andrews, two places, the Andrews Institute and Leadership Tennessee. And for the last 9 years, we established and nurtured Leadership Tennessee, which is a really well-known statewide leadership program. And now they've launched out, they're in the process of launching out and being their own nonprofit. And we've begun the Andrews Institute, named for Nelson Andrews, who was a great civic leader here. And it's designed to help public leaders get skills, develop leadership other than getting a master's degree. So we kind of want to be a 360 model for serving Tennessee and serving Nashville.
Yeah, and I feel like everything you're talking about is so important. You almost really can't pick one versus the other, because when you look at leadership and public service, being a servant leader, understanding those dynamics, and then also too, when you talk about conflict and managing through challenges, my goodness, that's exactly what all of us are dealing with in society. Is everywhere you turn, you have very difficult social fabric to kind of understand.
Exactly.
And to appreciate, but also to make sure that you are putting yourself personally, your family, your corporation, your entity, your organization, all in the best possible scenario. But you have to understand so many complexities and manage through all of this chaos. And so that's going on in the world too. I mean, even globally. So walk us through on your end, especially at a macro level, how they kind of weave together. But like you said, the importance of really understanding these layers of what you're trying to unpack and skill up for our future leaders.
So we have an interesting dynamic. Public leadership in particular is some of the most difficult things you do now. You're right, it's complex. It's like an onion. The more you peel back, the more difficult it becomes. And now with social media, the amount of criticism, everybody can sit in the gallery and anonymously attack anybody who chooses to lead, right? And so in the midst of all this, we're saying, come on, this is what we need, right? And on the public side, like the service side, I was recently sitting down with Mike Krause, who at the time was the executive director of Higher Education Commission, and Mark White, who was head of the Education Committee in the House. And they were both bemoaning the fact that there's a coming cliff among public leaders, especially in state and local government, that a lot of them are getting older and getting out. And the younger ones, they're wanting to, if I talk to a young student, they all want to go to Moldova and stop sex trafficking, which I get, that's fantastic. But, life is managed by people who live here in Nashville. They top the roads, they manage your schools, and there's a huge loss in that. And some of that's been challenging and conflict in other arenas. And it's really, really difficult in the rural and regional areas, right? So we've committed to developing leaders, and that overlays, for example, conflict. They have 2 courses in a 10-course master's. They have 2 courses on just how to manage conflict, because so much of what we do, people are trying to undermine. We've divided up, we're going different directions, right? And so it's interesting. We have full class. I didn't know how this would go, but that leadership of public service fills out every year. There are people who say, I want to make a difference, but I don't know how to get there. And so that's the job of that one. Conflict management, interestingly enough, is across the map. So several years ago, when Mayor Barry was still mayor, and there was that awful shooting in East Nashville, police shooting that caused all. It was the Institute for Conflict Management that worked the mayor's office to hold a citywide conversation of 1,000 people and the police in one room. And the skill set of those professors, in particular, Dr. Michelle Steele and Dr. Phyllis Hildreth and me and others, kind of pulled this together, because there's a way you have difficult conversations. There's a way you approach difficulty that if we do that, we can be productive. The challenge is getting people to get off their own kind of sound rooms, listen to their own voices, and being willing to kind of hear the other side. So we're committed, even at the environmental level, somebody says, how do these all get together? We're about building bridges. in an environment where building bridges is not the most popular thing to do. For example, we're bringing in Doris Kearns Goodwin. I don't know if you know who she is, but a world-renowned historian and author. She just wrote a book on leadership and conflict, looking at presidents. And so she's going to come in November and spend a day with our students and a lecture about leadership in the public space. You know, we're all about that kind of thing.
Carry that forward, because you do have the lecture series. And so that's the R Elliot Lectures. And so
right.
Elaborate a little bit more on that.
So Mr. Elliott, several years ago, he's passed away, but he was kind enough to endow a series of lectures. And he says, I want lectures that address leadership, societal challenges, things like that. And it's grown enough to where we've been able then to bring in some of the best and sometimes more controversial, but people who are nationally known, who are trying to engage challenging conversations. So this year it's Doris Kearns Goodwin, who we've had before. She is fabulous. I don't know if you've seen her, but there's this great video of her on I think it's Tonight Show or David Letterman, where they bring her out she's laying out like a queen as they bring her in, and she's almost 80, but she's fantastic. Jonathan Haidt, who's written some books on challenge and difficulty between generations. We've had, I'm doing off the top of my head, but some of the best and brightest minds in challenges societally, and they will come in, and it's completely funded, and they will spend the afternoon with select groups of students. They will then have a meeting with a small group of leaders in town who get to know them, and then they'll do an open lecture. It's free. You have to get tickets because it'll fill up, but before pre-pandemic, I think Jonathan Haidt had 400 people come in from the community and lectured and took questions and was interviewed from the community. And our idea is we're working on some really great people in the future. The idea is every year the community knows, free of charge, we will bring in a thought leader nationally that supports our interests both as a state and as a community.
Talk about moving the graduate school downtown and the kind of the external, dive in a little bit deeper on the external perspective in terms of engaging the community.
So, we've been on Lipscomb's campuses in Green Hills, which is a great campus. I had to do a little work with my faculty about going downtown because they love being on campus. But we're taking our graduate school, we're leaving our undergraduates on campus for obvious reasons, taking our graduate school, and at 4th and Commerce is the Lipscomb. It's called Spark Building, which has primarily been executive education, but is in this commitment to be publicly seen and public leaders. We moved our whole college in the process this summer, moved an entire college downtown so that we're a block from the state capitol, 3 blocks from the local leadership, our students. We have LEED certified buildings around us. All the things that we deal with are right there. And then it's easy for us. I mean, Governor Lee, Governor Haslam, I can go on and on, all come in and hang out with they take parts of days and hang out with our students and answer questions. And the mayor will be in, or the mayor's office survives. I think we have Dr. Jahangir, Metro Health. He comes in and talks health. So right there, our students get a feel for it. And then, of course, I'm really excited because we're half a block from the food assembly hall, and I will gain 400 pounds at Distillery and Donuts. So, it's great. I'm really excited about that. It's a place of gathering. It's a place of leadership, and we want to be seen as that in the community.
How can the community help and plug into what you're doing?
There's multiple ways, right? And so there's the big macro stuff. They can come to events. We have them all the time. I think you have our social media connections, and Jess, who handles our social media, is fabulous. So you can log into that and get our monthly newsletters and our events. And we have not only the big events, but we do Rule 31 training for mediators. We have certificates. So the Andrews Institute offers certificates in public leadership, in public, there's one in city manager certificates, things like that people who don't want to get a master's, that's there. That's all on our website, right? And so I would, at that macro level, at the very least, kind of come to some of our stuff, see the stuff. You'll have reading lists, we're gonna post videos of thoughtful interviews. We have one video we actually did with my local station, and it was Dr. James Hildreth, Dr. Jahanger, Mark Ezel of tourism, and now I'm doing off the top of my head one other leader in the community who just sat there and just talked about how you survive a pandemic, and it was fantastic. So all those are available. The other side is if you're the least bit interested in environmental, and all of our classes are offered for working people. So they're either evenings or weekends. You can finish a master's in a year. So if sustainability or conflict management, or you want to move into public leadership or hone your skills, contact us. We can help you get there. Our goal is to be, and I said this, a national model for how to do state and local service. We would like to model for the rest of the country. This is how the state of Tennessee shows you how leadership is done.
Absolutely. Give us one tip for you, kind of as the public speaker side. Give us one tip when it comes to, and I'll give you a lot of leeway on the servant leadership versus the conflict management side, but one tip or recommendation around either being more intentional and making our impact on the service side, or being better at, like you said, putting yourself in the shoes of someone else to understand what they're going through to manage through conflict. So
I'm going to give you 3 quick tips that apply to both. How does that sound? Perfect. So number 1, know yourself. It's so interesting that how little time we spend reflecting. And ask yourself a couple of questions, right? When you enter a difficult moment, whether it's public or private or in the family, and you don't know how to react, I mean, you'll have tendencies. Everybody has these tendencies. We actually test and give you these exams to figure those out. But I can tell you right now, everybody's got tendencies. You either withdraw, you attack, you do these things, right? And most of them haven't thought about them. And what I tell them is managing difficulty is a rational decision, not an emotional one. You need to push that emotion to the frontal lobe and ask yourself 2 questions. How important is the task or issue I'm on, right? And how badly do I need to keep the relationship with the person I'm talking to? And if you can answer those 2 questions, you can figure out how to talk to somebody. Is it, man, this is super important, and I don't care about that person, I'll just run over you. I'll stand out in a street corner and I will yell through a megaphone because I don't care what you think, right? The other side is if you're married to somebody, I don't know about you, but that relationship trumps a lot of stuff I want. And sometimes you just let people have their way. But a lot of times in leadership, it's both very important and we've got to keep relationships. And there's a whole skill set around collaboration that you really need to know and need to think about. It's a thoughtful, rational process. And it's not about you have to think like me. It's about understanding where they're coming from and how do we find a mutual way to solve the problem. And I know it's complicated, but that's the first kind of thing that goes with it. We talk a lot about what happens when you deal with bullies. What do you do with them? I mean, there's so many, I call it fun, but my wife thinks that's a little bizarre, but there's so many interesting kind of spinoffs attached to that. But if you can ask yourself those 2 questions and answer them honestly, you can find your way through a lot of stuff.
Yeah. What's one other one of your favorite? You're on a roll, so we'll just keep you rolling.
Oh, yeah, I'm always on a roll. Stopping me is the problem. Realize that just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean they're wrong, and it doesn't mean they're bad. Now, I will tell you, there's some really wonderful research that says about 70% of the population falls in the cooperative category. They kind of want to get along. They want things to go well for everybody. Even if they want it to go well for them, they want it to go well for everybody else. About 30% of the population want to go, hey, it's okay if it goes well for you, but I know for sure it's going to go well for me, right? And then there's of that 30%, there's another 10% that just shove you under the bus for the fun of it. There's some research that backs all that up, right? And you can't approach them all the same way. So there's different approach. So if they're in the 70 percentile, you got to have conversation and go below the line and ask good questions and learn things from them and find mutual paths, right? If they're in that 30% that's interested in just themselves, then you've got to decide, how do I kind of break them out of that so they can have a conversation. And there's something called the Axelrod's theory that'll help you kind of break down the walls. And then the 10%, you've kind of got to stand up. I tell people real quickly that your mother lied to you growing up. When your mama said, if you're nice to people, they'll be nice back. I'm telling you, 10% of the population see niceness as weakness. So there's a whole thing you do with them to teach them that, hey, you can't walk on me, right? They're all designed to push us to good, productive conversations. So there's tools we all need, and it works.
So what's one thing that you wish everyone knew about the College of Leadership and Public Service or the Institute for Conflict Management?
All right, there's a couple things. One is, I know we're private, but we're affordable. People all the time like, oh, I'd love to do that, but I can't afford Lipscomb. You guys, you don't know that, right? We have scholarships, we're interested, and we're thoroughly, much to the chagrin of our CFO, I'm more interested in training people than I am making money. That's a problem at times, right? But we are thoroughly committed to training up the next generation of leaders and supporting the leaders around us. And we are so geared toward prepping you to be great at what you do. And so that's one thing I want you to know. This master's is a good master's. We have students going to get PhDs out of it, but most of it's geared toward people making Tennessee a better place. The second is we don't have a political agenda. In the current environment, I get asked that a lot. So do you lean right, lean left? We don't lean anywhere. We provide a process that allows people to work together, which most of the time means some people on both sides are mad at me at almost any given point. And then the last thing is that you can do it. This is not magic. It's a process. And anybody who's willing to commit to the processes can be great sustainability leaders. They can be great public leaders. They can be great conflict managers. It just takes a commitment to it. And we kind of teach you how to do it. Yeah. And we need people. This state is woefully short of great. We have great leaders. We just don't have enough of them. And all the leaders will tell you, we need more leaders, especially younger leaders. Very concerned that some of our younger, really great people in the state have the sense there's only one way to solve problems, and a kind of an activist, and it is a way, but kind of an activist confrontational approach, which is a way, right? But it's not the only way. And we try to give you the whole set of skills.
I always feel like when you invest in yourself and you invest in leadership, those are things that ultimately will benefit you, but obviously benefit the community. And to your point, the world in general needs more people who have empathy and leadership and understanding, and especially around servant leadership. So all of those things that you're doing are powerful ways to change not only your life, but obviously the lives of others in our community. So website, social media, the website is lipscomb.edu/ICM. So lipscomb.edu/ICM. And then the social media is Lipscomb CLPS. So Lipscomb CLPS is the handle on that. But wrap up with your email and just where can people go to reach out and connect in with you and learn more?
So my email is just steve.joyner@lipscomb.edu. So pretty simple, right? And if there's anything we can do to be helpful, if you have more questions, please. I've got a whole team of people. You may hear from me directly, or you may hear from somebody a lot more competent than me, but we're happy to reach out. We're happy to be part of the community, and we're honored you chose to visit with me today.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Joyner, thank you for all you and your team do. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you very much.